Mr Deputy Speaker. I rise today to talk about the very important issue of mental health and inform the chamber of a newly established facility on the Sunshine Coast that promises to become one of the leading mental health hubs in the nation. Despite the Sunshine Coast being known for its wonderful lifestyle, it's a sad fact that it is recognised as a hotspot for youth suicide and home to a growing number of people with mental health challenges. Mr Deputy Speaker, 1 in 5 Australians will suffer from a mental illness in any given year. Each day, 5 males and 2 females will commit suicide. In 2014 alone, 108,120 years of potential life were taken away by suicide. Despite the obvious social consequences that accompany mental illness, there are significant economic consequences that must also be considered. The costs associated with mental illness in Australia equate to around $60 billion. That represents 4% of our GDP and is the equivalent of 12 million working days being lost each year. Numerous organisations work alongside the government to combat mental illness on a daily basis. Community groups are also tackling the issue. On Sunday the 16th of October, I took part in the first ever Walk for Mental Health. This event saw Australian Rotary clubs from Alexandra Headland, Maroochydore, Kawana, Buderim and Mooloolaba come together to raise money, and a big shout out to my good friend Vicky Stewart for organising that fantastic event. I'm happy to report that around $4,000 was raised for Australian Rotary health research, and the funds will support scholarships for PhD students researching mental health issues. Mr Deputy Speaker, earlier I mentioned the Thompson Institute. The University of the Sunshine Coast is currently developing a dedicated world-class facility focused on addressing mental health issues in the community, particularly depression and dementia. After more than 4 years of planning and a very generous donation from philanthropists Roy and Nola Thompson, the Sunshine Coast Mind and Neuroscience, the Thompson Institute, will be a hub for mental health research, teaching and public clinical services. Earlier this year, Professor Jim Logopoulos was appointed the inaugural director of the Thompson Institute. Jim has 20 years of experience as an intraoperative neurophysiologist and was the director of clinical imaging at the University of Sydney's Brain and Mind Research Institute for the past 5 years prior to moving to the Sunshine Coast. Jim's pioneering techniques in the use of MRI, magnetic resource imaging, on brains have brought science closer to finding the cause of schizophrenia, and he'll be continuing his own team's research on neuroimaging. Just as importantly, he'll be educating the next generation of brain scientists and specialist doctors and work closely with the team at the new Sunshine Coast University Hospital. The Turnbull government recognises the numerous mental health challenges that exist in Australian communities. That is why we are investing $192 million to strengthen mental health care, establishing a further 8 suicide prevention regional trial sites and an additional 10 headspace centres. Our nation recently commemorated Remembrance Day, and it would be remiss of me not to mention the prevalence of mental health issues among those who have served our nation in the Defence Force during times of peace and war. The Turnbull government is committed to improving and maintaining the sound mental health of our veterans and ex-servicemen and women. In 2016 budget, we announced $46.4 million so that anyone who has served in the Australian Defence Force, even if for one day, they have access to free treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression and alcohol and substance abuse. Mr Deputy Speaker, it should be noted that a connection is not required between these conditions and their service. Eligible veterans need to contact the Department of Veterans Affairs and they will be sent a white card that may be used to pay for their treatment. This treatment is uncapped and fully funded. I should also note that the Veterans and Veterans Family Counselling Service provides counselling and group programs to veterans, peacekeepers and eligible family members. This service will play a crucial role in helping to assist the lives of our veterans and their families, and the Thompson Institute on the Sunshine Coast is there to help.